Thank you very much for tuning into the podcast, Hostel. This episode features a man I know, coming to know very well. His name is Jeff Thelens. He's almost a bit of a mentor to me. I met him in Bansko at the Nomad Fest there. He was holding an unconference session about YouTube, podcasting, content creation, all that kind of good stuff. So I thought I would check it out. And he actually forced me to create a video while I was there. He forced everybody to film a little video just to kind of get us out of our comfort zones, because this podcast was something I'd been thinking about and talking about doing for a long time. And it kind of helps kind of to have somebody give you a little bit of a push. And he's a very interesting character, and he's kind of the first, I would guess, success story I would like to lay some claim to, because he was interested in outsourcing and coming to Serbia, and I kind of feel like I nudged him along in the right path, and very happy to say that it looks like everything is going very well for him and his YouTube business that he is expanding here. And so for Jeff, I want to sing a song, a Serbian song, very topical. This is called Pukni, Zoro, which I think is about a war and coming back from the war and coming home. And it's just a beautiful little song. Da li čuješ, mila, moga konja kas? Da li čuješ, sa planina zovete moj glas? Zasviraše trube, završi se boj. Zvona zvone, zora sviće, vraćam se, rode moj. Aj pa pukni, Zoro, staru majku probudi, pa da vidi ko joj dolazi. Aj pa pukni, Zoro, moju dragu da ljubim, bele grudi da joj zagrlim. Kad tamo daleko vidim odžak siv, staru šivu rodnju njivu, vraćam se kući živ. A najboljih nema, odneo ih boj. Čuvala me slika tvoja, vraćam se, rode moj. Aj pa pukni, Zoro, staru majku probudi, pa da vidi ko joj dolazi. Aj pa pukni, Zoro, moju dragu da ljubim, bele grudi da joj zagrlim. Aj pa pukni, Zoro, staru majku probudi, pa da vidi ko joj dolazi. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Hostel. I'm your host, Milan Milutinovic. How you doing? And today I've got a very special guest, Jeff Thelens. How you doing?
Yeah, doing really well. Enjoying my time here in Niš, Serbia.
This is your first time in Serbia?
He's been a good host for me, so I'm getting to know the city. This is my kind of second week in Serbia. So
yeah, nice.
Hopefully I have some interesting stuff that we can talk about.
Yeah, I've got a lot of interesting stuff. We met in Bansko Nomad Fest 2023. And you told me you were interested in outsourcing in Serbia at that point, or was that in your mind? You went to Bansko with the mindset of outsourcing in the Balkans, or what led you to Bansko?
What led me to Bansko? So I had spent 2 months prior to that traveling in Europe. So I started in Istanbul, was in Amsterdam, Paris, Brussels, Stockholm, Sofia for a couple of days, and then in Bansko.
Yeah.
And I travel a lot of like trying to find out maybe where I want to have my home base.
Yeah.
I haven't really connected until that with a ton of digital nomads. And so it just seemed like a good chance to go somewhere that I may not end up visiting otherwise. And then also to be around a lot of other people that are traveling a lot, which would make it more fun than, I record content for YouTube. I rent an Airbnb that I think I can record videos from, but it's not the most social way to travel versus staying in a co-living, going to Nomad Fest and things like that. So it was a good excuse to meet a lot of other people. And I think it was a phenomenal event, allowing me to make a lot of new friends, people I can travel with, potential business partners. There's a few people that I interviewed for my podcast. So all in all, it was a phenomenal event and motivated me to want to travel more, to see more parts of the world. You convinced me. Well, I was already thinking of coming to Serbia. More I was going to go to Belgrade. And then between your advice and actually hiring someone that lives here in Niš, I was like, all right, I'm going to spend a week here.
You've recently made 2 new hires for your company. Maybe tell the people real quick about, you were saying you're a YouTube content creator. It's a full-time job for you. You create content on YouTube. You have a channel. Maybe talk about that.
Yeah, so it's something we just kind of fell into in a way. So I had a previous business. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later on. But through that, started creating content for YouTube where we put up a couple videos and they just kept showing up over and over again in search results. And we're just like, I think there's something to here. Yeah. I actually shut that business down, but learned a ton about digital marketing. And so we had started with the person that ran the marketing for me for that business. Her and I started as an agency at first. Yeah. Realized we didn't like talking to people. Yeah. And just wanted to.
Do you like talking to me?
Yeah. I'm putting up with it for right now. Talking, not necessarily the issue, but executing and doing work for clients as an agency is kind of what we start out with, of like, hey, we learned a lot about digital marketing. I think we can help people. But the execution of a bunch of different clients, and I think one of the difficulties that we had when we first started is we had no expertise, and so we would just say yes to everything. So we had a bunch of clients in different areas, and we didn't really know what we were doing. And over time, we were managing those clients, but creating more content for YouTube, seeing that opportunity, and over time started making money from our YouTube content, launched some online courses, and then from now, we have an expertise in YouTube and video for beginners. So if we want to have clients, which we do occasionally, we have an expertise and do it when we want to work with somebody. But most of what we do comes from content online through YouTube and through online courses. And we run a couple different channels, both in English and Spanish. So, I spent 10 years living in Latin America. And, one of the things with doing a lot of different things is, I'm spread really thin. And so trying to spend more of my time kind of focused on creating content, either kind of talking head videos, education videos, the podcast that I'm working on. Yeah. And so hired 2 people here that are helping with script writing, creating the other content for social media for us. And so hired 2 people here in Serbia a little over a month ago. Yeah. And it was a little bit tough. Anytime you're working with somebody that's like 9-hour different time zone. Yeah, because you're based right now in the States. I'm kind of homeless at the moment, so not really. I'm looking for my home. So the place I spend the most time is so during COVID I was with my family in Michigan a lot, but the last couple of years I spent a lot in Mexico, where some of my business partner and some of my team is. Yeah, and then spent a handful of months both this year and last year in Europe, and. So, but when the 2 people here started, I was in LA, which is 9 hours different than lived in Serbia. And so I wanted to come here before all this, but then hiring someone and you trying to get me to come here was like, I should go check it out for a couple of weeks. It's a good time. And
meet the team and everything.
So it's remote work, wonderful. But there's something about being able to work with people, face to face.
For sure.
And then, just as a small benefit, the same time zone, but then face to face. And
of course, it's you're always better off working in person when you can.
And so spending kind of a couple of weeks doing that, which I think allow us to, work together much more efficiently and see a country and a couple of cities that I hadn't been to previously.
Yeah, very cool. But this isn't the first part of your outsourcing journey. You were saying you built a company in South America. Maybe bring me back. Let's go back to the beginning. You went to school in America. You grew up in America.
Yeah. So I grew up in Michigan, near Lansing, East Lansing, where Michigan State University is, studied finance, kind of found my way from there to getting a job in investment banking in New York, working, 80-hour weeks, all the horror stories Classic. You've heard, done that a little bit.
My brother did that. I know about that.
So that was an intense couple of years. Did another kind of 2-year stint at this investment fund there. Right. In the meantime, because this will come in later, as far as like the whole Latin America part of it was, in college, I studied abroad a couple times, chose going to the UK, not having to learn a new language. But, during working in New York, it was like I had the one job for 2 years and then the other job for 2 years. And between those, I had 6 weeks off. And I was like, I'm going to get the hell out of New York. Do something different a little bit. So I was either going to go to Asia or to Latin America. And just really by chance, my suite mate from my university taught English in Brazil for a couple of years, but had moved to New York. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to be in Brazil then. This was in 2006 during the World Cup. And he's like, Brazil's favored to win the World Cup. We could be there during that, and I can show you around. I was like, we're going to South America.
Sounds cool.
Some of my other friends from my analyst class talked into going with me. So we spent, I think, 10 days in Brazil, a week or something in Argentina, a handful of days in Colombia, and a few days in Panama. And then I came back to that next kind of job for 2 years in New York, but thinking of like, hey, I don't want to be the American that only speaks English. So I had a tutor where like on Saturday or Sunday, we would meet one-on-one and talk in Spanish for 90 minutes.
You looked at South America just kind of for holidays and having a good time. You weren't thinking about opening a business there or anything like that.
No, at that point, I was like, I had my career in finance in New York, but kind of coming back from that was like, there's this whole world out there kind of, and this excitement of something of like, do I want to spend, my entire career in New York? Maybe want to experience something different. At a minimum, I want to speak another language. So I went through the 2 years at the fund that I was working at. And a lot of people do this like 2 years, get their MBA. And then for me, it was like, hey, if I want to do something completely different, maybe it makes sense to do before my MBA instead of getting my MBA and being like, I'm going to move to the other side of the world. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Right. And so basically what I did is I finished up that second 2 years in New York and was like, hey, I'm going to move to South America. I'm going to start work on my Spanish a bit, see if I can work for maybe a year and then think about getting my MBA. And you're going to
work for a company that working remotely, or you just thought, who knows, just go and
I thought my Spanish was going to get better and to be able to work in the language. It took a bit longer to be at the level that I am now. But at the same time, this was 2008, so there's a whole financial crisis. There wasn't a lot of hiring, especially in financial type roles. So what happened, it was like July, I think when I moved down there at first, was taking Spanish class like 5 hours a day or something. It was like very intense to pick up a new language. And then between July and Thanksgiving, so for the US, like late November, was there learning Spanish, networking, seeing if there would be a job opportunity. And then at that point was like, not really happening right now. Why don't I go back to the US where there's different rounds for applying for your MBA? And one of them was like early January. And so basically I like head down, focused for 5 or 6 weeks applying for a handful of different schools. And then knowing that depending on the program, I would either start kind of probably August. And so I was like, hey, I have a few months. What should I do during that time? And so some of the people that I met while I was in South America before were like, hey, could I do an unpaid internship for a couple of months? So I actually went back to Argentina, worked there for a couple of months.
And what kind of company was that?
It was they invested in real estate, some like fixed income.
Was that an international company, or
no? It was
were you speaking Spanish at the job?
No, it was mostly in English. My Spanish wasn't perfect at that point. I mean, I could understand a lot of stuff, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people at that kind of level was like, most of what they would do would be in Spanish. It was a meeting in Spanish. I wasn't important enough to really have to talk all that much. So I could absorb a lot of it. I wasn't wasn't participating a lot. Right. At least at that stage of speaking another language. But, it was a great kind of opportunity to spend a couple months, see what work culture was. Not only was like what it's like learning a language and kind of fun, but then also like what a more professional life maybe like in another country.
Is it quite different, you would say, in Latin America? In America, it's kind of the same thing? Or?
I mean, cultural things like work schedules. I mean, I think, what time people start, the things I think here, for example, in Serbia, I think lunch is really, really late. Mexico is kind of that way. Right. And so there's like, the time of day of different things, or if you're trying to balance, in a place like Argentina is really tough, where you try to balance work life and social life, where you don't normally get dinner before 10. Right. And if you want to go to like a club or somewhere like that, it's like places open at 2 a.m. And so like not busy till 3. Right. And so it's like if to like go out during the week and do something, it's like even to have dinner, it's like you're finish up at midnight. Yeah, it's crazy. And so it's like adjusting to things like that. Every culture has its own things that are a little bit different in terms of like what work is like, what everything is like outside of work. And so it was a phenomenal experience. And then it was like a couple months there. And then I did this really interesting program. So I went to an MBA program called the Wharton School, but then they had this dual degree program. So it's not just business, but it's also very focused on international type issues of basically it's called the Lauder Institute. So Estee Lauder, the makeup company, wanted more international executives. So they create a program where you have to have spoken another language beforehand and want to study.
But who is Estee Lauder? That's a makeup company.
Yeah, so it's huge, multi-billion-dollar makeup
not
company.
Not American? Or?
No, they're American, based in New York, and so they studied at the school, and so they started this program where it's like kind of you have your MBA, but then also study like international studies like economics. Right. I had a couple hours of language class every week. Right. And then the interesting thing, which kind of cut my internship short, but it starts, usually the school in the US starts kind of August, September. This starts 3 months earlier, where the small group of us started in May, spent a month together, and then we spent 2 months abroad, whatever language you're studying. So I spent a month in Argentina and then a month in Spain. Another kind of random story there was like we were supposed to go to Mexico for the month instead of Argentina, but it was like the whole swine flu issue. So like you can't go to Mexico, you go to Argentina, and it may have
Mexico was like locked down, or they didn't let people in?
I don't remember. There's like it's not good to go there for now. So we went up in Argentina, and then the crazy thing of like it may have been as bad there, but they just weren't giving out tests for it. And so you couldn't actually figure out if you had it or not. And so what happens is there's probably, so for the whole program of different languages, there's like 70 people. The Spanish group was one of the bigger ones of like, I think there were 17 or 18 of us. So we're in Argentina. A lot of people were like traveling on the weekends. And what happened once is so in Argentina, if you got sick, they wouldn't give you a test unless you were like on your deathbed or 80 years old or pregnant or things like that. But some of my colleagues, friends, classmates went to Chile for the weekend. In Chile, they weren't feeling well, got tested, figured out they had swine flu. Like half of the 16 of us had similar symptoms. But they wouldn't do the test to figure out if they had it or not. I didn't end up getting sick during this. But what happened is like during this program so then somehow I think the school back home found out about it. Somehow the school we were supposed to go to in Spain found out about it. And then eventually the point of they're like, you can't come to Spain and take classes here.
Oh, wow.
And so the school wanted to kind of like, you can just stay in Argentina a little bit longer, then you can quarantine and then like come back to school in the fall. And we're like, we already have our tickets to Spain. It's like, we're not sick anymore.
But you could enter the country, the school though.
Yeah, it was the school. It was like, we don't want these. It was like obviously way before all the COVID type stuff.
It was kind of similar.
It was a little bit similar. I think it was not anywhere near as severe, obviously, and didn't spread as much. But anyways, we were like canceled from one school. Everyone was like weeks later, no one was sick anymore, and we're just like, we're going to Spain with or without the school, basically. And so we finally got them. They found another university in Spain that would actually let us in.
Wow.
It was kind of put together last minute because we were like revolting students in our master's program. Spent a month in Spain, which was phenomenal as well. Where I was like, had an opportunity where we studied in Madrid, but then it was like every weekend we went to like a different corner of the Iberian Peninsula. So I spent my birthday before the program started there in Lisbon. We went to see the running of the bulls. We went to Tarifa, where there's a bunch of kite surfing. But that was a phenomenal experience to be able to see a couple different countries, have a couple issues, and then 2 years in school to be studying business, to be studying Spanish. And then I, after school, went to work kind of in a similar role of working in finance in Colombia, actually.
But you were telling me you ended up starting a company in, was it Colombia?
Yeah,
it's like a clothing company or something?
So a couple different companies. So I don't know if there's a timing of like studying entrepreneurship a little bit during my MBA, or being in a country where it wasn't quite what the US was in terms of like what I was used to. And so there was like, maybe this could be better, or what if things were done this way? And so it was like a handful of ideas. I was like started, kind of a notebook taking notes of like different business ideas at that point. So I think at one point I thought of like, I want to do something entrepreneurial, but up until that point, there was nothing really that jumped out.
Were you always entrepreneurial? Were you entrepreneurial as a kid and stuff? Did you have like a paper route and all that?
As a kid, not so much. I mean, I somehow had this interest in it. Like there's this thing in the US called, there's different like college painting companies. So essentially this company would recruit college students that want to like have their own branch of a painting company for the summer.
Well, like painting
the outside of houses,
right,
basically.
Right. Okay.
And so it's like you get off of school, they basically train you how to paint the house. Then you like hire friends or whoever it is, like hand out flyers in places to be like, hey, we're this college student learning about starting a business and like
and we're gonna
try to get we're gonna paint your house. Which
it doesn't sound that appealing.
Couple lesson learned of like hiring friends can be there. Some of them worked out well. Other ones were like did whatever they wanted. They're like, Jeff's not gonna care.
He's my buddy, right?
And so like managing clients, managing degenerate friends, like all sorts of fun. So like that was a bit entrepreneurial, but and then I worked for.
Did you make money doing that, or was that just
a little bit? I mean, so it was like you'd have to like measure out kind of the square footage of the outside and like how much trim would have to be painted, and then come up with a proposal for them.
Right.
And then so it was like you had the proposal, X% would go to the company that trained us to. So much we estimated for materials, and then like basically what was left over would be mine. Yeah. It didn't always work out according to the estimate that we put together, not having our years and years experience of painting homes, but it was definitely like a jump in the deep end moment of learning how to run a business and not having just, hey, you clocked in for these set hours and here's the salary that you earn.
But you enjoyed the entrepreneurial aspect. Like, did you say, hey, this is for me?
I think so. That for sure was kind of a first peek into doing something entrepreneurial. Yeah. And then during school, I've always I think it's really tough, especially in today's day and age, to find your path where there's so many different things you could do to create a living. And, it was maybe less complicated a while ago, but for me, it was like, did well in math and science. People were like, do engineering, or maybe you could do something business related. And then after kind of that summer, I came across this like insurance company that was like basically like working in financial sales, like selling insurance and other financial products. Okay. So it was not like me starting a business, but not having a salary, and it's basically 100% commission based. So I did that during school for a little while. So it was like a little kind of dipping my toe in something semi-entrepreneurial. But then went like very corporate type jobs for
and then you went into finance,
like,
the whole corporate
hey,
thing.
I'm good at math. I kind of networked my way into those jobs. It was interesting, and I think with where I am at now and with everything kind of digital marketing, one of the interesting things is like taking interest I have of being more creative and being entrepreneurial, but then the great thing with everything digital is it's so analytical at the same time. So it's like we do a lot with Facebook ads for some of our courses. And so to be able to see like this is something fun and creative and funny that we put together to sell one of our courses, let's say. And that's like you can see like do people click on it, do people purchase from it, you see like all of the analytics for it. And so that's kind of where over time it's like definitely didn't have this figured out when I was in college, and we'll probably talk more about a bunch of random things that I've worked on over the years. I've kind of fallen into something that kind of over time, is a mix of a bunch of different things that I'm really interested in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so tell me, when did you become entrepreneurial in Latin America, and how does that? Is that not harder to be an entrepreneur in a foreign country, let's say? Like, that to me sounds more intimidating and scary.
So I think in a lot of ways you move from Australia to Serbia, of seeing things that are done differently. Yeah. Sometimes it's like, wow, that's way better. Why do we do something a different way? Yeah. Or sometimes I think that there's a lot of opportunities for outsourcing, let's say. So it's like something costs potentially less here than it does in other parts of Europe. Or
less for sure.
So I mean, there's definitely ways to kind of connect Serbia or parts of Latin America to, say, the U.S., Canada, Australia, places like that. And then there's obviously opportunities to bring businesses that can be done differently. I mean, I think if you think of like the Ubers of the world, let's say, having to wait in the rain because in New York or San Francisco for a taxi is, inconvenient, but it's unsafe in some places where Uber is now. So I mean, there are some businesses like that are providing an even greater service in some countries than maybe where it was originally started.
And you said you had a little notebook of the differences and why you were looking for opportunities.
Yeah, if something is like one big company in the U.S. that does something, but it's like all mom and pop businesses in other countries. Yeah. Like maybe there are some economies of scale of having multiple locations of something. If you're talking about something like one-on-one.
And what was the first business that you started then in Latin America?
I think one of the things of like graduating from a top business school where several of my friends raised like multi-million-dollar seed rounds for their businesses. It's like, that has to be easy. I can do that too. This is simple. I've never run a business before, which some of them had. And so there's a bunch of things
so
that
you were
get
looking
into
to raise money immediately?
Well, so I got a job at an investment fund.
Right.
Wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing, and at the same time having all these entrepreneurial ideas. Yeah. And so I was like not completely happy with the job I was in, and was like, this would be much cooler to do than what I'm currently doing. And so it was interesting. My brother, who's maybe even a little crazier than I am, drove his motorcycle from the U.S. to Argentina by himself without a map.
Nice. I like it.
And then through some people that I like, he had gotten a job actually in investment banking too, but in Chile. So his Spanish is probably better than mine.
Right. Okay.
So he was working. He was working there for a while, and we were just kind of like talking about different ideas and things. And there's a lot of programs, especially at the time, that were focused on kind of bringing foreign entrepreneurs to play. So there's a program called Startup Chile where you can get, I don't know what the terms are for it now or how it works, but essentially we got a $40,000 grant for starting a business and living there.
So they were looking for foreigners to come.
Yeah, so they would accept both locals and foreigners to basically start and run a business there. Right. So as a way
they gave you $40,000, and this was a while back. So I mean, that's
this would have been 2012. Yeah. 2012.
So I mean, today that money maybe is what, $50,000 or something.
It would have a bit more.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like they realize, a place like Chile is very kind of like natural resource rich. So there's a ton of like big mining companies and things like that. But it's like very, very far from everything. Earlier we were just talking about, which I think people don't always realize, of like how far it is to get to Santiago, Chile, or Buenos Aires. So like from New York to Buenos Aires is like an 11-hour flight. Yeah. So like the same thing with Santiago. So it's very, very far, a bit isolated. Yeah. And so it's a matter of like, how can you, similar to some of the conversations we've had around Serbia, sometimes of like, kind of change the mindset or show people opportunities that maybe that they're not thinking of right now.
Because they have that same mindset of, well, there's nothing here or something.
Along those lines of like, go get the job at this big corporate company versus like Silicon Valley and startups and technology and all of those things were much less prevalent. And so they're like, what if we just import a bunch of entrepreneurs and they can it's smart.
It makes sense.
So I mean, I think it worked. I think some of the people that were from all over the world end up staying in Chile, having their business there. At a minimum, end up hiring locals. So it's like a lot of the a lot of that money, or a decent amount of it, was probably invested back into the Chilean economy, and people are learning new skills from someone on the other side of the world. Yeah. And so it's an interesting way to kind of kickstart a more dynamic economy.
So you and your brother, you both together got the 40 grand. Yeah. And then what was that business? What were you doing?
Yeah, so, I mean, really one of the things we were looking at the time, and it's still a bit of an issue of like coming from the US where it's something like 9,000 banks, let's say. There's a bunch of financial services companies. There's a lot of competition. So in general, as a consumer, you don't pay a lot of fees. I mean, people in the U.S. probably complain about bank fees, but it's like at a whole new level where, having to pay $10 a month just to have a debit card. Or, there were too many transactions and here's this. Or there's just a bunch of different things. Which is quite interesting
because the poorer countries generally seem to have more banking fees and stuff. Why is that?
I mean, it just comes down to anything that's like quasi-monopoly. If there's 5 competitors for something and they all know each other and they're like, we won't lower the fees if you don't lower the fees. I mean, it's not quite that too much collusion, but it's like
that's just
no
what
one
the
wants to really rock the boat.
Yeah,
it's
why
just
would
like,
you?
Hey,
we're
kind of happy. Everyone's making a lot of money right now.
Yeah.
Why would we want to be on a race to the bottom of like having this not be profitable?
No, of course.
And so there's just like a lot of frustration, lack of trust around that. For a good reason, just given how expensive everything was. So if you, for example, want to get a mortgage, if you want to get a car loan, if you want to anything where you needed to borrow because you wanted to do something, super, super expensive.
Right.
But then on the other hand of like, you're not at all with high interest rates, like in an ideal world, if interest rates are really high, like they are in a lot of the world right now, is really a bank should take some margin where they make a lot in their loans, and there's like this fee that they make, and then the rest they pass on to the people who gave them money, the savers. But if the savers are charged all these fees, and it's basically a cost to have your money with somewhere like that, like they're not like if you're saving money and you see your account balance go down because of all the fees you're charging every month, you're like, it makes it, you're like, I'll just keep it under my mattress.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like seeing a lot of those dynamics and trying to come up with like an innovative solution to allow people to save, to put money aside for the future, to make better financial decisions. So the issue with that of me or my brother and I both being a bit ambitious with wanting to do something that requires, it's very regulated, requires a lot of money to get through all of the red tape.
You're basically trying to start a bank.
Yeah, there's less regulated, less expensive, kind of investment funds or things.
But you were trying to build a service to let people save their money and to give them loans and stuff, right?
Yeah, more on the saving side of it, of like trying to help people of like, hey, you can get ahead by setting money aside for a rainy day, for your retirement, for buying a home versus to, you see in a lot of places, if you go into probably a lot of parts of the world, you go into like the super or the Walmart of the world or whatever, and it's like, this is in Spanish, it's called quota. So it's like how many payments is something. And so it's like, this is only, $5 a month for the next 8 years or whatever it is. You're just like, if you do the math on that, you're basically buying 3 TVs for the price of one. And people, the part of it is the education and a bit taking advantage of the consumer. And then there's not opportunities to save your money or education to kind of lay that out. So it's like trying to find better products to be able to do that. So we did a lot of like not having a regulated financial company of like, why don't we share education, which is interesting thinking back on of like kind of what we're doing right now. But at that point in time and in the countries we were in, there wasn't a way to actually make money through content that we're doing right now. But as a way of like really being more kind of like on the side of the consumer of trying to help them make better decisions as opposed to like this bank that's like, how can we make as much money as possible from
and you would try, so you were creating content then to kind of try and educate
and then also as a way for us to potentially show investors too, like the discontent with the system of like, here we understand the consumer's frustrations, what they're looking for, what their goals are, but like under how things are currently managed is really, really difficult.
And so you ended up getting the 40 grand. Did you get other investment for this
From bank? That, it was like we spoke to a bunch of different investors, but it was like, it wasn't something where, you have, an MVP. It was like, oh, with another $100,000, we can do this. And with, so we can prove, we can do more, create more content and show people are pissed off at the system.
Right.
But we're not going to be able to actually build a bank with a small amount of money or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, how much money do you need to build a bank?
It was something that was like in the low, like several $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Of the types
just
of things we're looking at. Yeah.
Really?
Just pocket change.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of people, both investors and others, love the idea of like, I see the need for this. And I think there's a couple lessons learned there of like one of where we are with what we do now of like don't need any investors for what we do. And so it's like can start small, start with nothing. Yeah. You're recording this episode with your phone right now.
It's much more appealing, yeah.
And so you can build a business without needing investors. But one of the like tough things to hear sometimes is like, great idea, but I don't think you're the right person to do this.
Oh, hurts the soul.
Kind of and so we realized that and tried to find advisors and other people. But at the end of the day, there's a successful business in Brazil, and there's a bunch of other businesses like a decade later that are doing some of the things that we had hoped to do at the time. But I don't think I had the right experience. Was this before
you had like TransferWise and Revolut and all that?
Yeah.
It was that kind of a service that you were envisioning. But
similar. There's some of the things that are similar with that. Yeah. But just in general of like trying to make the system run much more efficiently and help people get ahead financially, which is interesting enough of kind of talking through things and thinking through things of how something that was like part of what was an interest previously kind of comes back into your career later on.
So you were creating content and the bank thing, you never got enough investment, I guess, for it. And then you moved on, you started making shirts or something.
Well, yeah. So again, I had this long list of business ideas.
Yeah.
For me, all along the way, probably would have been smart to just work for 5 years and pay off my MBA student loans and a lot of things.
No, this is way more fun. No, I think this is good. I like what you did.
But
I wouldn't interview you if you did
but
that.
I wasn't ready to do that. And so, but the nice thing is that like some of the previous experiences I had, having an MBA from a top school of like, was able to find some kind of like freelance consulting work for financial services.
Remotely?
It was remotely. Right. And so I was able to earn like a decent wage
so you
from
were
the U.S.
one of the OG
for a little while.
When was that working remote?
That would have been, when would that have been?
10 years ago?
13, yeah, probably 10 years ago.
Right. So you had some people doing the remote work then.
And so so at the time of like to hire someone, this investment fund that I was doing analysis for, to hire someone in New York, a lot of money. I was not making the same as what I would have in New York. Right. So everyone was happy with that. Like I was extending my personal runway of being able to work on stuff longer. But it's like a handful of different business ideas that I'd had. And what I worked on for a long time. So after living in New York, one of the things I remember really fairly vividly of like, coming from like Lansing, Michigan, not the most stylish part of the world, had never actually been to New York until my job interview during college. Started work there, and I remember, I went and bought a couple of suits or whatever before my first job. Yeah. Go to work one day. I thought wearing a brown suit was okay. One of my bosses walking, he's like, "Don't ever wear that again." I was like, okay.
Why not? Why are you allowed to wear a brown suit?
Gray, navy.
That's
like,
it.
It's just
okay. You got to go along with
couple.
This is what you're allowed to do. Otherwise, all right.
Like, don't do that again. And
you never wore the brown suit again?
No, I don't think I did. I don't know where that is. Probably got donated right after that. But it's one of those things from kind of that point onwards, where like starting to have a job, starting to have a little money, of like the importance of dressing well. Yeah. And but there's just a bunch of issues around it. So it's like finding stuff that fits. It's like, what should I be wearing? And so how do I do this with the least amount of effort possible? And I think a lot of guys can relate to that so when I started the clothing company, it was just like having conversation of like these main issues, where I think for a guy, a lot of times to like find something that fits, that lasts a while. I was like, I'll just buy all the colors, or I just have like 10 of the same thing, because I don't want to think about this. I just know that this is good. Yeah. And that's kind of the opportunity, but the point but getting to that point, I think, is difficult for a lot of people. And then I think a lot of times men are more, have have an easier time asking for advice from a woman than, so like how many men go shopping with their significant other to be like, hey, how do I look in this? Like you and I going to the mall together and picking out clothes.
Not really.
Probably
I haven't invited you to do that once.
So probably not going to happen. So a few things of like being in a place like Colombia where there's a lot of large international brands that produce clothes there and sell them abroad was like, it seems like it would be a good place to be able to produce clothes, but things seem to be, for especially international brands, more expensive there. Yeah. The number of options that you had was less.
And why is it more expensive in Colombia? Is it because of the customs office, or like why?
Yeah, I mean, I think
this is one thing I always wondered, like why are things more expensive in poor countries in like things?
Well, I think one of the main issues is it's not a priority for the large brands. So what happens is like they set up their entire supply chain to like, how can we get stuff as cheap as possible to the US? Right. And so that doesn't mean that like that country, say Vietnam or wherever, has like a free trade agreement with Colombia. There may be like high tariffs between those countries. But H&M or whatever the company is, that's not their main focus. It's a very small market. So it's like they rely on the brand power of it to be like, people are going to pay the price that we can offer it here.
They pay the premium that they build in America by making it a big brand.
So it's like we design everything to be able to be, arrive in the US or their other major markets as efficiently as possible, which doesn't necessarily mean that they want to deal with like, well, let's just deal with a local Colombian supplier or Peruvian supplier because there's a free trade agreement with a bunch of companies in South America, and we'll deal with that supplier and the sizing and getting the samples and doing all that stuff. It's like, we just want everything made in this one place. Yeah. It's less complicated for us. Yeah. And the less important smaller markets kind of just have to deal with it. Yeah. Or it's just a matter of like, they see themselves above certain local brands too. And so they're like, well, we have more pricing power and can charge the price with that potentially too. So I was there and was like, I'm 185 centimeters, so like 6'1". Yep. And so finding clothes for me living in Colombia, also not the easiest thing. And so one of the things.
People are short in Colombia.
A little bit shorter, a little shorter than, and I'm taller in the U.S. anyways. Okay. And so, finding clothes there, I was like, I'd wait for my next trip to go home or whatever it was. And I forget where it was that I came across like some different tailors making clothes and so I was like, it'd be interesting to see like if we could, and there were some companies I knew, working in finance in New York, there's these tailors a lot of times from Hong Kong or parts of Asia that would come for like a couple of days and basically take a bunch of people's measurements and then ship them suits. Right. I imagine Australia, there might be things similar. There were some startups in the US that are kind of going after the same thing. And I was like, well, these issues are common all over the place. And the nice thing is of being in Colombia is like, we can probably produce a lot of this here. Yeah. And so, it was like, that was kind of, I was doing the consulting work in the back of my mind, or when I have some free time, was kind of exploring a couple different ideas. And then there was this like expo, there was this expo for big clothing manufacturing in Colombia. And so I went to that and met someone that could make the shirts, met somewhere we could get fabrics. And so I was like, let's give it a try. I went and visited them. I still have the very first shirt that they made for us. Cool. Here, let me get some water.
Have some water, my friend. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. And so met them at this expo, made the first shirt, and was like, this might actually work like this. And so I was like trying to think through, and there's probably a few lessons in starting this business of, I'm very, like super optimistic, idealistic of like, here's the perfect thing working. And for me, one of the other issues in a lot of much larger cities is just like the traffic and getting from one end of the city to the other, and like not having great public transportation. And there being a big value for not having to do that. And so really the idea was to have someone that basically would have like our book of fabrics that we could make for someone. Here's the different type of shirt designs. And really the idea like longer term was like to be able to design someone's entire wardrobe. So it's like, my t-shirt size and my jean size and my suit size.
Right, okay.
And know like some of this, be able to have on file all the other stuff that I already own. So it's like, hey, it's spring or whatever season it is. Here's some of the cool colors. Like, just send me these 3 in the size you already have with me.
Yeah, right.
But it started with dress shirts. That was something people are used to making, made to measure.
Yeah.
And had the fabrics for it, but wanted to basically go to someone's office. You don't have to deal with the traffic in Bogota. And so we'd take their measurements. They'd pick out everything from like the collars that they want to cuff. Everyone loves to put their initials on their shirt. Not my favorite thing in the world. But hey, if they wanted, we would do that. And it was something that people loved.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, I don't have to travel anywhere.
Yeah.
I had a one-on-one relationship with somebody.
Yeah, who's creating your clothes.
Who's like helping me pick stuff out.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if that's the right color for you. I see you more in this. And so you build up, that's the other thing of like, you build up this trust and the relationship that was built through that, that you wouldn't see in a lot of other places. And so that was this very high value add where it was great because we would kind of what I was saying, if someone has something that they like and they're like, I just want 10 of them. So I have one, like this works. Maybe they make a small adjustment on the first thing they get from us. And then they're like, I want a bunch of them.
Yeah, right.
And so it was like really fun. People love what we were working on. One of the issues of like me just having the financial resources to just get by, even having some family help at times or whatever during some of these, not the money to start the business right. So it was like kind of doing stuff.
You kind of just scraping by. And you weren't doing this with your brother. You were by yourself.
No, I was doing this by myself.
Yeah.
And so the issue of like just scraping by of like, having an idea of like, this is the type of business that we want to create, but not having all the resources for it. And so kind of push things along as much as we could.
Right.
We did get into 2 other startup accelerators. So there's one called Parallel 18 in Puerto Rico, and then 500 Startups has operations in Mexico City. And so we actually open up in both of those. And, one of the things of seeing like a huge opportunity for this, but it was like raise 50,000 or 100,000 or decent amounts of money that allowed us to go. But it was like really, at least with how we ran the business, was like we had stylists who would go visit people in huge cities. They had to travel long distance. So like, if we made your entire wardrobe, completely super profitable idea, making just shirts, and the first time you buy from us is just one.
Right.
There's a cost to doing that, and then the issues with production. So we had issues where, if it was made right, people loved it. Yeah. But, we had to have someone in the factory who would like double check all the measurements, which was an expensive thing for us. And so having things done how we wanted them, we essentially wanted to have our own factory, which was like maybe a few $100,000 investment and like not a huge, like as aggressive as what we wanted to build previously, but still enough money to like do things right. Yeah. And one of the issues, if there's not just, there are times when there's just tons of money in the startup space and valuations and the amount of money that people raise is very, very high. But having something that's kind of limped along for a while, being in Latin America where there's not a lot of local angel investors, there's more and more, and it's grown. And then a lot of people, say in the US that I know that are investors, either VC investors, part of my network or what have you, were like, interesting idea, but I don't understand the market. And so I think a lot of investors were just smartly of like, if you don't feel like you understand like who someone they're selling to or how it's all going to work,
they can't give
it's
you
kind
money.
of a bit of a black box. And so it was tough to kind of pull together the investment that we needed to really do all of that. I guess on the bright side of having to close that down at that time, of if we had successfully raised more money for it and done some of this, I don't think we would have survived COVID. And so we would have grown more, taken more investors' money that to say,
and then just
sorry,
exploded.
We lost it. Have more people would have to say sorry.
Gee,
you
that's
don't
tough
have a job
though.
anymore.
Hey, you got to tell the investors, hey, your money's gone.
The employees were tougher. I mean, the investors are, it's like no one is like mortgaging their house to help me push the business along. And so they were, it's a scary conversation. They're making some of those first phone calls, but it's like I'm still friends in touch with some of the people that invested in that company. And I think a lot of a lot of people do well with a more traditional job. Respect someone who's like, I wouldn't be doing this, and I respect you for giving it a try. And,
right.
You know, I invested in this knowing that, you know, there's a good chance that
it could explode.
That I didn't get my money back.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think especially where there's not the same startup culture of having someone that's working with us that's, you know, and I shared as much of like, here's what we're doing and how fundraising is going. And obviously the team knew that like I'm always running around trying to find investors. You know, there's just not an infinite supply of money, but that was probably one of the tougher things of having.
So you're running the company by yourself. Yeah. Most of your investors, I guess, were English speaking.
Yeah, there were some in Colombia and some in the U.S. Yeah, so it was a kind of a mix of both. I would say more from the network that I had and networking in the U.S.
Employees then were, I guess, mostly Spanish.
Yeah, most of them were Spanish. Most of them were.
I mean, this
is
what I find unbelievable. Like you learned Spanish, and then now you're running a team.
Yeah, it was like
Spanish.
15
like
people.
How did
at one point there were like 15 people at one point.
Yeah, like how did you even feel that comfortable with your ability in the language to do something so ambitious?
I mean, it obviously varies from country to country. One interesting point, kind of side note of like, I think I was in Estonia or Latvia or somewhere. I was like the smaller the country, the better the English sometimes.
Right.
And I think part of it is like say Serbian is a smaller country. There's not this huge media industry for movies and this, that, and the other. And being around somewhere like this, I would say that very few instances of like not being able to get by in English.
Yeah, no, for sure. You can get by completely fine.
In Latin America, so most Spanish speaking, or probably in Brazil, like there's hundreds of millions of Spanish speakers. Yeah. And you know, and a lot of those countries unfortunately don't have the best education systems either. So like the level of English isn't as high, and so a lot of what I had to do was in English. In maybe a place like in Serbia, maybe a little bit less so. Yeah. But at least some of the team it varied. It's always fun in situations where you speak the language, but then someone else speaks English as well. Where you know, if you can get to a point where you're like, I know what we talked about, I'm not sure what language we had that conversation in. Right. Whereas like it could have been in Spanish, sometimes it's in English. And so it's fun to kind of get to that point. But yeah, with that business, like when I had the first internship was just like, don't talk to Jeff in Spanish probably. Or like if a conversation was happening, I would understand a lot of it. But to be at a point now where, you know, even to this day, we haven't talked as much about the content we create and things to this point.
Yeah, were you creating content for the clothing company?
So the clothing company, that's kind of where we fell into, I would say, YouTube, where what happened is the nice thing in Latin America at the time was, you know, the ad market wasn't as developed. So like we could run Facebook ads and get people to sign up and want an appointment for us. We'd call them, set up an appointment, and sell clothes to them. And so that worked in, say, the U.S. That's just so much more expensive. We even ran some tests for it,
where cost per click and everything.
It's just like 10 times more expensive.
Okay.
And so you really need to think about organic traffic in, say, the U.S. But we kind of like, we're just like, ads work. Let's keep doing this. But like, I had seen a few kind of like investor presentations of similar companies, as like a huge amount of their traffic came from organic sources, and I was like, you know, we should be doing more. So a blog, social media, through YouTube, and it was like right towards the end of when we were in 500 startups in Mexico that we started a YouTube channel for the clothing brand. So Laura, my now business partner, who is running the marketing, we have an ad for our YouTube course in Spanish right now, where it's like, you know, my business partner Jeff like forced me to create content for YouTube. It's like, here's the first video. I was very upset, as you could see in this video, and did not want to be doing it. So it's like, you know, her in front of her computer with like a presentation up with like zero energy. And if you see her on camera now, like super energetic, big energy. But it's this kind of joke with our ad now of like, So Jeff forced me to get on camera and record content. And he's like, be in our course, and I'm going to do the same for you. You've been thinking about creating content for YouTube, and then I'm going to push you to get off your ass and create content for YouTube.
But what?
But so anyway, so she would create content. No one wanted to hear me on YouTube in Spanish. So I was like, somebody else needs to do this, and you drew the short straw and got to do it.
But why was she against it? Why didn't she want to do it?
I think it wasn't it was like my job is this. So like I'll look at the Facebook ads and do this. Like I don't want to be on camera for something. Like I didn't sign up for this. And this would have been like 2017, I think. Yeah, so a while ago. And so, we started with that. So it was like we had videos on like how to tie a tie and things like that. There was like every weekend, everyone's going to a wedding. And they're like, how do I do this? And they would find one of our videos.
Nice.
And it was kind of because of that we realized was like, this is really powerful. Of just be able to create something once and for like weekend after weekend to be like thousands and thousands of views of like all the people that don't know how to tie a tie. And then they relate, formal clothing to our brand. I mean, it's not that they're going to come and buy something tomorrow. But it's one of those things that like if you're just out there continually and to build a brand around something that there's this huge opportunity. So, that was one thing that that one of the the last like super helpful lessons that we learned for that business. And then again, like just wasn't able to put together the money that we needed to fix all the things that needed to for things to work well. And so it was like, unfortunately having to shut it down. But during that of like being in the different startup accelerators, one of the things with any startup is like grow or die. And so a lot of the mentors and people that came in to speak were all marketing growth related. And so again, what we talked about a little bit earlier of like the analytical nature and creative nature of a lot of things, especially ads and other stuff, was like something I just really enjoyed. So it was like, I always had people be like, hey, can you look at our Facebook ads or what about this? And so kind of had built up of like people asking for help with that, which I think with anyone starting a business of like is a good place to start of like, do people seek out my advice for something? And again, like me not wanting to like go get a day job of like, we'll just start a marketing agency.
So after the clothing company ended, you're like, let's do a marketing agency.
So we like really, it was like a month after shutting that down. I think we had our first couple of clients. But it was something that doing the work and understanding that was like, okay, we can do the work. But the being an agency, the finding clients, the keeping them happy, and then too, it's definitely and I hadn't really worked with this as much of like the need of the other person's input too. So it's like, we worked for a pet clothing company, let's say, and so it's like we need photos, we need this, we need. You need some input from the brands that you're working with. And some are like, give me sales and I'm not going to do any work. You're like, well, I don't have a dog to take it. I don't have the clothing. So like, how do I get good photos for this, let's say? Or, if someone else wants to build their personal brand and, okay, well, you need to be on camera. So when are we going to schedule time or can you record stuff and so it's just tough to get all the work done, to get what you need from them, deal with the feedback and everything that they want for it. And then too, when you're just starting, not having, again, of like, I would say anybody who was starting a business to have like an emergency fund, to have money set aside. From one failure to another. I was like, I'll figure this out at some point. Not how I'd recommend doing it, but I think how, and how we kind of teach people through if it's starting on YouTube or somewhere else, but like, if there's something you're interested in, is like keep your day job. Something like on YouTube, let's say, you can create content at midnight or whatever time it happens to be and start to kind of build something up and build a bit of an expertise. When we were just saying yes to everything, and then we're like, well, we need a graphic designer now, and so we need how do we get all this done? We're not going to do this ourselves. And so it was like just a lot of like trying to find the resources, trying to keep clients happy, trying to find new clients. And I think we did some good work during that time, but it was just like chaotic. And over that time though, we kind of continued to, or on and off, I would say continuously, we were creating content for YouTube. And kind of over time built up an audience there, started making some money from that. right at the beginning, like around 2020 when COVID was starting, some of our content really took off on TikTok and Instagram. And more in Spanish. So I was camera shy, not recording on camera for a long time, and Laura, my business partner,
is you were camera shy as well, but you made her.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to do this.
I don't want to do it.
Somebody needs to do this. It's not me. No one wants to hear me in Spanish, so it's like you should figure this out.
Right. Okay. So you were camera shy too. Hey.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's like I've gotten over it a bit, but I like to do. Like I have my space in my studio and this, like not like vlogging in the middle of like other stuff going around.
That's totally
There's
different.
like a stupid bird chirping out the window. I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, I'll wait for the bird to stop and then I'll record again because I can't concentrate right now. So it's been a struggle to get started, but yeah. So we were kind of building that out, and then around that time too so I had student loans and trying to make all this stuff happen. We were doing okay with the business, but basically I decided to take a job for a period of time in the U.S. So I'd moved back to the U.S. and was helping out nights and weekends, lunch break with this business. Right when COVID was starting, everyone was like, our channel blew up of like teaching digital marketing online. Everyone wanted to figure this out. And then so we're like, what if we create a couple of courses? And so that was really the point where the business took off, and we had a lot of different ways that we were making money from the content.
Right.
And then so it was like I had left that job at one point, and then
mainly through selling courses, you were teaching people how to market on the channel.
Yeah, like how Instagram works, how YouTube works, and then so it was like YouTube, we make money. We do a lot with affiliate marketing, so recommending products and services where basically on YouTube you could say like, hey, and if you're interested in learning more about X, like, there's a link down below. Yeah. And so if someone uses that link and makes a purchase, then we would make a commission from that. Yeah. So like a handful of different ways that we were monetizing the YouTube content. And then another way of like we would create what's called a lead magnet. So it's like we create a piece of content we would give away for free, but someone would have to sign up with their email. Yeah. And so we would at times when we create a lot of content that we're mentioning something we're giving away for free, we maybe get like 100 email signups a day. And so through that you have someone that you already know, like they're interested in the topic, you have their email and oh, hey, by the way, we have a course that it's an even further level of our teaching around that topic. And so it was a great time for our business to be able to go from like a struggling agency to like one of the leaders in kind of online digital marketing content in Spanish. In Spanish,
wow.
And then it's like when I kind of quit the job and that I was working for in Minneapolis, it was like I need to slowly, like I got to start doing some of this too.
Yeah, right.
Because there is a bigger opportunity in terms of like the affiliate marketing opportunities in English, as well as what the ad revenue differences are. So like per view would make more in English in the U.S. than say Spanish in Mexico.
Right.
Because there's more advertisers, they're spending more money per view. And so it's like, hey, time for you to start creating as well.
In a better position, perhaps there is less kind of this type of content in Spanish than there would be in English.
Yeah, so I would say that like the need for it is there. But there definitely wasn't as much competition for it. So I mean, that's one of the things that allowed us, I think, to grow so quickly. Laura, my business partner, is more charismatic on camera than I am.
You're pretty
one piece of it. So that helps, and there being less competition and getting a bit of a head start. But all those things together. So, but right now, like our Spanish YouTube channel is 400,000 subscribers, and the English one is 40,000.
Yeah.
To have a 10x difference between the two. So it's like a bit of a head start, and she's probably better on camera. It is what it is.
Yeah, very cool. And so now you're, that's been a full-time thing, I guess, this YouTube for how long now for you guys?
So we started the agency, would have been 2017. 2020 was, I left the job that I was at. And basically since then it's been full-time on YouTube, online courses. And one of the things of like, obviously, you don't have to go through the whole crazy journey that I've been through to be successful doing this. And part of it's like why we teach a lot of this of a lot of different things of like, I'm happy to make a bunch of stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, okay, I think I've got this figured out.
Yeah,
like, here's how you can cut out 90% of the things that I did wrong.
Yeah.
And do this much quicker. And I think with video and with YouTube specifically, it's like such a huge opportunity to just have something that you want to talk about, that you're interested in. You don't have to be an expert in it, which I think holds a lot of people back. Because it's like, oh, I have 20 years experience in this. It's like, you know, if I want to get in shape or to do something, it's like, a lot of it is mental. And so like, do I want to hire an Olympic athlete who's been training twice a day since they could walk? Or someone who's like, hey, I had these struggles, I figured this out, and I just, you know, here's what I've been doing for the last year and a half, let's say. And so you can relate to someone like that a lot more. So
you don't need the biggest expert. It's just someone you can relate to.
It's someone that you can relate to that understands the level that you're at. Because like that Olympic athlete was probably never like overate or did this. They like had the perfect routine and nutrition their entire life. And a lot of things are that way where you want to root for the underdog of like, hey, you know, I'm going to start creating a podcast. This is my very first episode. A lot of people on YouTube leave their like very first video up as like a sense of pride. I was like, it was really that bad when I started. and today it's, you know,
this isn't so bad.
It's not so bad now. So like it's not that bad at least. And so that's really the opportunity. Like, I think that holds a lot of people up, and that's like where we teach a lot right now. We've kind of over time gone from like anything digital marketing. Loud on my business part did a lot with Instagram, some with TikTok, and we've kind of refocused of like really like YouTube for beginners. Being that it's like it scares a lot of people away, which means there's less competition than Instagram or TikTok. But then there's more ways to make money from it. There's a longer life to the content you create. Like what I was saying with the how to tie a tie, it was like months later, we have videos now that are like year or 2 years later are still getting lots
it keeps
of views,
going. It's evergreen content.
Where you can share things with the world and it just keeps showing up. And if it's for your business, if it's sharing your passion, and it's something that you can just, you know, be like, document your journey. So there's an author I really like, Austin Kleon. He has a book called Steal Like an Artist, which is
Austin Kleon.
Yeah, Steal Like an Artist is one of the books on like, there's like nothing really completely new in life. It's all, maybe you don't know the source of the inspiration essentially. But then what was next?
Good artists borrow, great artists steal. I mean,
that quote is all of those quotes are probably in that book. His next one is called Show Your Work. And so it's just really about kind of, you know, and Gary Vee, I think, says like, document, don't create. And so if there's something you're like, hey, I'm going to learn, you were playing the guitar earlier of like, you know, just watch 3 hours of YouTube content playing the guitar. Here's the first X song that I'm going to play and document that.
Right. You mean like that. Document, don't create. Okay.
And so as opposed to thinking, so it's like something you're kind of doing anyway on your journey. So if you're recording what's happening along the way and then sharing that. And so, I mean, that's one way where you can be a complete beginner. And there is someone who's more beginner than you because you just put those 3 hours into YouTube and recorded a video about it. And then, you know, 3 months later, you know, there's even more, you know, ahead of you've gotten even further ahead from like the complete beginner. And so you can share whatever it is in that way. You can do what we're doing now as a podcast of like, I don't know anything about X topic, but I'm just curious and I'm going to go interview people about it.
Well, I feel like I get to talk with people like you, have a deep conversation. I'm learning a lot and we're sharing it, and hopefully some other people out there will be like, yeah, maybe Jeff's pretty interesting. He's probably worth listening to. And you are, for sure, I think. Yeah,
well, thank you. Hopefully people can learn from all the stupid stuff I've done over the years. But kind of, you know, followed, you know, at any given, like, I thought I had it all figured out. Like, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work in finance forever. And I was like, kind of got there. And I was like, this isn't quite what I thought it would be. And then it's taken a little while to kind of figure out exactly what I really enjoy doing and really provide a lot of value in. But I think it's really interesting what we're able to do right now.
Now you see yourself as being a content creator, kind of. That's your long-term plan as well, because it's funny you said you were content shy. Or do you see yourself as a content creator?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think one of the things that we were talking about, this, what is it, Art of Learning book by Josh, who is
Josh Waitzkin.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that I think is important that I'm slowly getting back into of really realizing like what are some of the things that really that have had a big impact in your life. So for you, maybe it's something music related, let's say.
For sure.
For me, there's like a lot of like networking and having conversations with people, and a lot of like really amazing opportunities have come out of that. I think for YouTube now, what I'm not good at, and has part of the reason of like hiring people in Serbia and doing a lot of stuff of like trying to, being a little overwhelmed and trying to take away some of the things I'm not good at. Like I'm not the most like structured, organized person. I have probably way too many ideas of like my list of business ideas whatever it is, and like let's learn French, or I'm learning a few words in Serbian on my phone, or whatever happens to be. There's a lot of things like that I'm doing. So it's like getting someone to help kind of like take some of those ideas and turn it into something structured that I can just read off of a teleprompter and create content around. Of like, it's my idea and I have a lot of input along the way, but like have someone help speed up that process. The review process of the content creation, not so fun. And then, but still, like the scripted stuff isn't as fun as this conversation is for me. And so trying to get to a point with our fun, Jeff. Trying to get to a point where, you know, even with some of our channels now, like maybe I don't even have to be the one on camera. Have the idea, we get to a certain point, and we have some of the right scripts, someone that's on camera. Kind of a business that runs itself. But I think some of the podcast type content that I get a lot more excited about.
You've got a podcast as well.
So we have one for Greater Than Enough for personal finance.
What's it called, sir?
The channel is called Greater Than Enough.
Greater Than Enough.
And so again, another kind of like full circle thing where I've like worked in finance and even like as a kind of financial advisor for an insurance company. And then what we did with the bank of kind of coming back of like taking what we learned from YouTube and sharing that type of content right now. And so really, you know, obviously if you read the news anywhere of like people feeling like they don't have enough, they can't buy a home, inflation, some of this was like poor, you know, decisions that people make around money because no one ever taught this stuff. But basically people feel like they have less than enough, and how to turn that around so people feel like they have more than enough. So it's a matter of
that's why it's greater than enough.
So it's like the little greater than sign of me, kind of math third kind of idea. And so with that, basically there's a couple of things of like, how could someone make more money? Maybe it's they need to know how to ask for a raise, or learning new skills, or starting a side hustle, or there's a lot of potential ways to do that. To think smart about where they're spending money. It doesn't mean you can't do anything fun ever, but like you can't spend a ton on travel, have a nice car, have nice clothes, have the nicest food, have all those things of like, you know, maybe prioritizing what's important in life. And then obviously setting aside some money for the future. So we create content, kind of scripted YouTube content, and the podcast that is a couple episodes in. I think we published 3 on YouTube, and there's 5 episodes that I've recorded that haven't been published yet.
Okay. So you're on the beginning of your podcast journey.
So that's just getting started. And then I think just thinking of how much easier it is to create this content than the script, at least for me, obviously having the team that's scripting stuff out and much more organized than me. But for me to, for any of the podcasts to just be like, okay, this person is expert on something. Maybe they have a book, or I see some of the other content of like, I have a dozen questions that I could ask the person. And then obviously they kind of like through this of like the conversation just kind of flows or whatever you're talking about. It's like, there's a few points that maybe I want to talk about. I think that for me is much more enjoyable and easier than like me stressing out of like, you know, we have 2 video editors right now, Diego and Abril. And like in our videos all the time, I'm like apologizing to them. It's like, sorry, you know, this is 10 takes for this one, but I think that last one is good.
Right. Oh, so you just let it keep rolling.
So I mean, the same thing with this podcast. I mean, maybe there's something here that you decided to cut out, So I used to do stuff in bullets where I like, here's the 10 points. And so I'd have those maybe off to the side, and then I would talk on each one. But of like trying to learn with any career, this is kind of like how my mind works with delivering content on YouTube. But it's like, hey, I want to make like A, B, and C is caused by D, E, and F, let's say. And you start talking, and that doesn't come out that way.
It's so different.
And so especially if something's a little like kind of complicated, it's not just like a random conversation. You're trying to kind of pack information concisely into something. It just doesn't seem like it comes out right.
It's very different talking just to the camera directly versus me and you right now. It's like 2-way conversation. It feels like we've kind of covered all the topics that I wanted to, but there's no like, it is much easier.
There's for sure a stress to, because if you think about it too much beforehand, one of the people that I interviewed was like, hey, do you want me to send you questions or things? They're just like, I do better when I'm.
Just let it roll, man.
Just turn the camera on, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Because I think the issue, if you think about stuff too long, then when words start coming out of your mouth, you're like, that's not what I was thinking about. And you get completely caught over your words. And so I think, like trying to get back into the things that are more enjoyable and easier to do. And so the kind of like free flowing conversation, and who knows, maybe after creating a podcast content that I feel like delivering content to camera that I have the same level of confidence. But I think it's, trying to do more in that realm, I think is interesting, just having conversations and then trying to find. So I try to read and listen to audiobooks quite a bit. And so two things that I've been going through recently, one is called 10X is easier than 2X.
Yeah.
And the other is Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah.
And both of those are just like, you need to.
What is 10X is easier than 2X?
Well, because the main thing that they're talking about is like to go 2X in something usually just requires you should just work harder.
To just be twice as strong?
Well, like I want to make a little. If I want to make twice the money, is like, well, if I do this like 10% more and I do this a little bit more, and you think incrementally about stuff.
Right.
There was this person that I saw on Instagram. It may have been yesterday, kind of completely unrelated, but it was like if you have a really big goal, and it's something in this 10X book too, it helps you clarify things. So if you're making $5,000 a month right now, let's say.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do I go to 10? You kind of think of like kind of small tweaks to get to 10.
Sure.
Like if I'm gonna go to 50.
It's a radical mindset change.
There's a bunch of stuff you're like, I gotta stop doing that. That's not gonna get me there. And so there is this like clarifying that happens from that.
Yeah.
Where you can clearly see like that's not gonna get me there. And so like that probably means that like I should stop doing that, or I should outsource this, or I should find something. And then it's like if we were to do something that's going to make that much of an impact, and it just very much allows you to kind of hone in on this is really going to make a big difference. And so part of it of like getting the team to help you with things so you can focus on the most important things. Maybe it means you need to hire someone to work in this one area that you really have that much potential around. A lot of like the 80-20 rule with stuff of like a lot of just kind of trimming out the things that you're doing right now that aren't really moving the needle on stuff.
Yeah.
And then the buy back your time is interesting because it's a matter of like, basically he has like a hierarchy of like the different things that you should like first get rid of your administrative work. So it's like, you should not check your email. You shouldn't manage your calendar. You shouldn't do this.
You shouldn't check your own email.
No. Because like how many times do you check it and like how many hours of time goes into that?
Yeah.
And is like how much of it is all that useful?
But then who checks it for you?
Your assistant does. So.
And then they call you and tell you what's important.
Most of it's probably they can respond to a lot of it.
Yeah.
So it's like if you set up like here's common stuff that I need to respond to.
Yeah.
You can respond to that. And then like, maybe you have a call weekly or twice, whatever it is, is like, here's the 5 things that I couldn't answer myself.
Yeah.
That, you need to do this, this, and this. And then like, they could probably even write like, here's what I think we should respond, but I'm not comfortable enough responding to this one.
Yeah. Right. If
it could be, setting up guests for your podcast. So, figuring out contact information but anyways, it go through like different areas of your business where, I mean, eventually, there's one of the books I like, it's called Traction, where they use this method called EOS for organizing a company. And they talk a lot about that they've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, they will call visionaries, that are generally, a bit too optimistic, not great with details, having lots of ideas, which is like, that probably describes how my brain works.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to executing that, great. So the other role they call an integrator, which basically works with the team to kind of fuse those two things. So when they can talk to the visionary and he's like, those are great ideas, but like let's bring it down to reality now and then like make sure that actually all the stuff gets done. And so I think over time wanting to be able to build something like that where, I think with a lot of things you can try to do everything yourself. Like I met someone last week that we were talking about that has this service business, and does everything. And so it's like, if you have to wait in line at the bank and do this and fill out this paperwork and all these different things, it was like, if you figured out what it would cost to hire someone to do that, and then you didn't have to do that stuff anymore, you could probably triple your business. Yeah. Because of all the things that you're doing right now, but like, you could easily train somebody to do those things. Yeah. Which then means you can do all, like, that she was saying that she has to turn away a bunch of clients because she's just too busy right now. And it's like, well,
waiting in line at the police station.
So they helping people, get their visas and set up businesses and things like that. Whereas like, there's, if you had someone that helped with a lot of those things, it's like you could easily triple, quadruple your business.
That's true.
Focusing on the things that are the most high value thing that only you need to do, and then all the rest of it somebody else could handle.
And to get off that theme, or just to continue on that, because you were saying you're looking at Serbia as a base for yourself, like as an entrepreneur. Like, maybe talk a bit about that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. So we hired 2 people a little over a month ago. Yeah. That mainly focus on kind of content creation. One person is just helping us, like, kind of helping on like all the operation organizational stuff as well. Yeah. So to think through all of the processes we have, how to be more consistent about things, which has been really, really helpful. There's someone in video editing we may hire. So, I mean, there could, in the next
you kind of
months,
building a big team, bit of a team.
Yeah. I think it's important in like a step function of like, it's like there's obviously the way of like, let's go find investors, or I have all this money in the bank, of like, how do we spend that? And then in 6 months, it'll be worthwhile. We're not in that situation, but I think there's a few things that we've been able to do. So for example, of like, we've been able to create a lot more content and focus on content that we're making a decent amount of money from through affiliates, through our courses and things like that, where, within 60 days, we're already earning more to pay to be at a better point than we were before making the hires.
So it's already been a successful venture.
So I think to be able to do that and to be like, okay, well, what are the other opportunities that we're seeing right now, and kind of going after the things that are going to create a lot of value. And so it's like, for video editing, it's like we have a bunch of kind of backlog of recorded content that hasn't been published yet. Yeah. And so that right now is the biggest bottleneck of like, if it's just sitting, the raw footage is sitting somewhere, it's not on YouTube, it's not on our course, our ads aren't running, that all of those things mean that's basically lost revenue. Yeah. And so having the additional editor means that all that stuff gets up on the internet, making us money sooner.
And what led you to Serbia? I mean, when did you first hear about Serbia? Let's go with that. Americans, do they know about Serbia when they're growing up and everything?
No, this wasn't an American, luckily, but someone in South America that I was talking to, I was like, oh, I'm serious, like, is that Russia? And I was like, no, there's a few countries you have to go through to get to the...
Well, they confuse it with Siberia. And
maybe, maybe the colors, the flag, too. Like, so it wasn't American that had the geographic difficulties. But yeah, I forget where it was. I had seen there's a few people that create content for YouTube that had mentioned Serbia before. Yeah. I talked to somebody who had hired in a couple of different Balkan countries. Yeah. And I was like, we've had really good luck in Serbia. Wow. And cool. so we use this platform called Breezy. Usually it's for bigger companies and very expensive, but they do have like Bootstrap, startup, some version where you can post one job at a time for free. Okay. And so with that though, so you create the job post, you make it live, and then they post it on, I don't know, there's like 20 or 50 or how many different job boards. And
in Serbia or in the whole region?
So you just basically put the location. So it could be Serbia. I mean, we've used it. So we have, my business partner and another person in Mexico City. We have someone in Argentina now. And so like in any of those cities we posted jobs before, and whatever, depending on the market, it could be Indeed or Monster, or I think, so in the platform, it'll tell you like where the candidate came from. And so I always kind of like check that out to see, just out of curiosity, which things were working. So I think In Serbia, it was Jabal. I actually don't know if I've actually been on that website, but it's like whatever. They push it there. Candidates sign up.
Great.
not something I need to look into any further.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing with something like that of like, hey, it's out in a lot of different places. Candidates usually find it. And so, I mean, we just choose a city, write the job description, and wait. And usually, I mean, depending on the role, but for video editors, for somebody to do marketing, I mean, if you have it out for couple of weeks, I mean, you may end up with, depending on the city, like 50 candidates or something like that. We have a video editor position in Mexico City right now. And I mean, so Mexico City is 3 or 4 times the size of all of Serbia.
Yeah, it's like, what, 20 million people or something?
So it's like we get like 10 applicants a day or something like that. So it's like, but yeah, if you're looking to hire someone, I've maybe it's right or wrong, but it's like when I've seen in a lot of countries what someone would be really happy with earning full time, and then potentially what you could maybe outsource it for on Upwork. If you need like 3 hours of work, pay Upwork and you pay something fairly expensive for that. But if you're like, I need someone half time or full time, maybe it's 10 hours a week, to kind of post how we do of like more. What would someone look for when they're looking for a job locally, which is kind of like the job boards, like Indeed or whatever it is. I mean, usually someone's looking for a job in whatever the city, country happens to be, and been able to find, phenomenal candidates there. But it's more of a consistent thing. So it's not a freelance, I need one video editor.
Yeah, you're looking for employees.
Yeah, right? Like 10, I would say, I don't know if I would post something there for 5 hours a week, but if it's more than that, I think thinking of like, and you basically choose the city you want to work in. Maybe you speak the language. So, if you speak Spanish, and, the great thing with hiring throughout Latin America is like it's basically the same time zone as the US. So like Argentina and some countries are an hour ahead of New York. Mexico is essentially mountain time. And so they're basically working the same time zone as you. Or, I mean, a lot of people I've heard.
So that's a good place to outsource from if you're American.
Or, there's a lot of talk on asynchronous work. And so it's like not necessarily having to be working at the same time. But for example, if I work up until the point I can finish something, the day's ending, and I send it to someone, and then they wake up and start working on it. It's like
that's how I work, because I work for Australian clients here in Serbia. 9 a.m. here is 5 p.m. over there, so it's the working day is completely unrelated, but it's fine actually. It just teaches you to write better emails and to kind of, we have like one meeting a week, and that's kind of enough. My main client.
I think it depends on the type of work, how much interaction there needs to be.
That too.
But I mean, it's good sometimes to be like, get as much done as you can. Be like, here's all this, and then wake up the next day. I was like, all right, there's a lot of progress that has been made. But yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the same time zone. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of different places where someone could, potentially try the same thing that we did. It'd be like, hey, there's a lot of people that hire virtual assistants from the Philippines, let's say. It's like, okay, what if I, put out a full-time job post in Manila? And see who applies for it, let's say.
Is it tough to hire people? I guess you never even get to meet them. It's all online. Like, how do you put so much trust and faith in someone that you've never even seen physically? Yeah,
so Abril, who works with us in Buenos Aires, I have not been there since she started working with us. We have not met in person, and it's been almost a year now.
Yeah, cool.
So, I mean, I'll get there at some point. We'll meet in person. Sure. But yeah, I think it's totally doable. I think for us, what we end up doing for interviews is like having a couple of stages that someone goes through. And so generally what I've done the first round interviews. So I hopefully I don't have to do this all the time, but at least that's how it's been up to this date of like, so application, the jobs posted, go through the resumes. I'll decide how many, we'll invite a dozen people to have a conversation with me, more kind of fit, getting to know them, previous experience. Could I see myself working with them?
Yep.
And then whatever the job is, we have some type of assignment for them. So a video editor, we're like, well, I'm not going to give them a 20-minute YouTube video to go through to do as an assignment. So I was like, a YouTube short or Instagram reel or one of our ads, it's like less than a minute. Be like, let's see how you edit this.
Yeah.
One thing we like to do is we do kind of like personality profiles.
Yep.
So the one that we're using right now it's called Principles U.
Yep.
So Ray Dalio and Adam Grant and others kind of put together this personality profile, which I think is very interesting to see just how people think, how they interact with others, how they're motivated, which just gives another, none of it's like the end all and be all. So it's like, meet someone, hey, I think we get along and work well together and communicate well. How was their assignment? Do I think that the personality profile matches with the type of work that they're going to be doing? And kind of taking a look at those. And then, for example, the role that we were interviewing for last week of like, I had met with them, we'd seen their assignment, the team, my colleagues met with them, and we all kind of huddle up and be like, what was our take and kind of make a decision from there. And I mean, it could be, you could hire someone to do one project for you potentially, if you're not quite sure.
Yeah. And
so like there's a way to kind of work into that too, depending on your budget, if you've hired people before, to try to find something that works for both sides, is to you to feel comfortable hiring somebody, of like, especially if you're just starting out, don't have a bunch of money, you've never hired before.
Yeah.
It's a scary thing to kind of, let go of some of the thing that you've been managing before. It's usually not, it's like usually people can do stuff better than me. And so I'm like, please take stuff off of my plate.
The right
but
mindset.
I think some people have the idea of like, no one can do it as good as me. And so like,
but in fact, someone could probably do it better.
but it's also gets into the 80-20 too, of like, if you're spending, a bunch of time, like, your home is being remodeled. Maybe a lot of that work you could do, but it's like you have a job that you're well paid for. Yeah. Should you quit that job and do remodeling, or should you use the money from your job to pay for the remodeling? And you can obviously think about that in a whole bunch of different ways. And I think identifying the key things that are going to make the most value for you, and try to get rid of some of the other ones if you can.
Very powerful stuff, Jeff. We've had a fair decent conversation here, so I think maybe we should leave it at that. But I'm wishing you all the best with your business and your content. And what's the name of the channel? You never even mentioned it. The Figco. Yeah,
the Figco. So most people, the funny thing is coming up with a name is like, for our team is just because we have courses, we have podcasts, we have a whole bunch. So like naming a whole bunch of things. Right. And it started with the business name. I was just like, what do we call this? Yeah. And so like a lot of companies are like law firms, it's like all the names and whatever. But that's like very stodgy. So we were like, what if we just take like the first 3 letters of our last name? So mine is Thelen, but the first 3 letters is the. Yeah. So people don't usually get that. And so Fig is from Figueroa, which is Laura's last name. And then there's like company is like, well, it's not just the 2 of us. There's other people there. So that's why. And the thing is like we were forming the company. It was going to be the Fig and Co. Yeah. But they're like, there's a Fig company in where we formed our business. Yeah. And we'd already bought the domain. And so we're like, can we just squish it all together and call it good? And they're like, yeah, that works. And we're like, all right, done. We've got a name. And so there's like a little animation that Diego did on our website that kind of like has our last name, has the last letters drop off, and it kind of all squishes together. Yeah. There's like 1 or 2 people that we've interviewed to hire that figured that out. Most people have no idea. Right. We get emails all the time for like someone that wants to sponsor our content, and it's like Figco or
I thought it was just Figco as well.
It's fine. And so it's like I joke that I'm the silent partner. Like I don't do any of the work and they handle everything. That hasn't been the case. But it's kind of with anything. I think recommendation would just be to get started. It's like you can change your name, you can change your focus. Yeah. But I think a lot of people stand on the sidelines, and I think there's a lot of great information online, and you could just learn into infinity.
Yeah.
And that's just another form of procrastination.
That's true.
So
that's
whatever
true.
someone's thinking about,
going.
if you want to be a digital nomad, if you want to start your own business, if you want to create a YouTube channel, if you want to
start a podcast,
whatever,
start recording, man.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
So maybe we end and you explain how we met and your first video that I think maybe isn't on this channel right now, because I think that maybe will motivate others for whatever it is they're thinking about doing.
Maybe I should put it there. Actually, maybe I'll let it come back. Yeah, because we met in Bansko and you were doing a little unconference session. Yeah. And unconference session is kind of like a little lecture, I guess, in front of a group of people. It's kind of informal, but Jeff was doing was it on creating a YouTube channel or something?
Yeah, so I don't think people saw YouTube and had to do in their head YouTube and beginner, start, whatever, but it was very clear as like first YouTube video.
I just saw YouTube and I rocked up, and then you were like
very clear. And so so I thought about this, and this is one of the power of doing things in person. But basically, talked for 20 minutes about why YouTube. Yeah, it's like 5 minutes of questions. Yeah, and then I grabbed my phone. It's over there now. Yeah, but and I was like, here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna grab your phone and be like, hey, this is Jeff. I'm starting a slow travel channel about this, and this. Yeah. If you're interested, subscribe to my channel. I was like, you're all gonna do the same. You have 10 minutes. It's like ready, set, go. And the power of peer pressure
gets them going.
Everyone got up and recorded a video.
Yeah.
Which if that was over Zoom, everyone there would be just full of excuses. Be like, I think I gotta go.
Like, my internet's not working right now. But it's true. The first video is probably the hardest, and I did it with you actually, which is quite funny. And now you're here for the podcast. And I remember telling you, I'm like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And you're like, I'm thinking about it. Well, you're going to start your first video. I was like, no. But then I realized, like, it's okay. It's going to be a little cringy. I'm going to feel a bit embarrassed about it and a bit shy. But, I mean, that's just part of the journey. And it's okay. Maybe I will unlist it.
Yeah,
it's also in Serbian. It's not even in English.
So mine's on my personal. That video is on my personal channel. I just like whatever. I published it. It's still up there, so they can find that somewhere.
There's
no mine. So I did the same thing. I recorded and I put it up there as well.
Right.
But it was that I was like, record it, just cut out the pauses and mistakes, upload it to YouTube, and you're a YouTuber.
And you're
now officially a YouTuber.
It's very powerful.
Whatever you're thinking about doing, time to get started.
Jeff is very good at motivating. I mean, you're a bit like a little mentor for me, I guess, or kind of my mentor these days, I feel like. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Teaching me some things. And
I look forward to seeing the development of this over time and the guests that you get on and really where this goes. I think there's a lot of potential. So
thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that. All right. Thank you for listening to the podcast Hostel. I'm your host, Milan Milutinovic. We've had a lot of fun today. Take it easy.